When it comes to beef in the sport of MMA, it is impossible to not think about the history between Israel Adesanya and Dricus Du Plessis. We know that these two are not fans of each other, but where did this whole rivalry begin? The story actually starts way earlier than you might think. The first interaction that we know of between these two began with a sparring session over 10 years ago at Tiger Muay Thai in Thailand. According to Du Plessis, he, quote, manhandled Adesanya in their grappling exchanges.
Yeah, I beat him in the grappling exchanges. He's 100% correct in that. I did manhandle him.
And according to Adesanya, he was indeed out-wrestled early, but went on to beat him up.
On the grappling, he had me. But on the striking, I just messed him up.
We did not do a single round of striking together.
Believe it or not, this wouldn't be the last time the future foes crossed paths until the UFC. Just a couple of years later, we see brief footage of Israel Adesanya and Dricus Du Plessis bumping into each other during a practice session in 2016. Fast forward to 2018, Israel Adesanya made his way into the UFC after an explosive start to his MMA career. The last stylebender would rise straight to the top, capturing undisputed gold in 2019. Just a year later, Dricus Du Plessis would enter the UFC in 2020 and begin his ascent to the top of Adesanya's middleweight division.
On the flip side, Israel Adesanya, when he made his debut, he said, like, when I win this fight, I will fight AB. Like, he had a name ready to go right out of the gate. Has anyone told you or gotten, like, you should kind of plant seeds early in your career so people may be more interested in the fight when it does happen?
Yeah, 100%. And I do believe that that's something you have to do. I mean, you can't leave it up to people saying, listen, maybe fight, because if you don't know you want to fight, you have to know you want to fight.
As Israel sat on top of the throne and Dricus began emerging as a title contender, the seeds of this rivalry were firmly planted at the UFC 285 press conference. Dricus was asked a question that would include the three former African UFC champions, Kamaru Usman, Francis Ngannou, and of course, Israel Adesanya. Du Plessis went on to question the legitimacy of the three champions as real African fighters, asking if the belts ever went to Africa during their reigns, and highlighting how he was actually born in Africa, lives in Africa, and trains in Africa, unlike them.
Well, I mean, did those belts ever go to Africa? As far as I know, it came to America and New Zealand. I'm going to take a belt to Africa. I'm the African fighter in the UFC. Myself and Cameron, we breathe the African air. We wake up in Africa every day. We train in Africa, we're African born, we're African raised. We still reside in Africa, we train out of Africa. That's an African champion, and that's who I'll be.
Of course, Adesanya was born in Nigeria and would eventually move to New Zealand with his family in 2001, where he still currently resides. The stylebender took strong exception to Du Plessis' comments. Adesanya feels he never questioned Dricus as an African himself and feels there is no need to cause division, claiming, "You can take the boy out of Africa, but you can't take Africa out of the boy."
I've never questioned him as an African because, yeah, you were born in Africa, South Africa. Of course, you're an African. I've never questioned that. But who the f*** is this gonna tell me who the f*** I am, who the f*** Kamaru is, who the f*** Ngannou is? I'm like, are you dumb? As a product of colonization, you're trying to tell me who the f*** I am. You can take the boy out of Africa, but you can never take the Africa out of the boy.
From this point on, one of the most heated rivalries in current-day MMA was underway. By July of 2023, we were just one fight away from seeing that as a reality. Du Plessis was taking on top middleweight contender and former champ Robert Whittaker in a fight that could make him the new #1 contender to his bitter enemy's championship. During the build-up to the fight, many doubted Du Plessis' chances against a legend like Whittaker, but not Adesanya. Israel picked Dricus to win the fight. Call it good analysis, call it his desperation to finally get his hands on Dricus, call it whatever you want, but ultimately, Adesanya was right, and we were now finally on a collision course to see these two fight. The two even shared an intense and highly controversial stare-down in the center of the octagon immediately following Du Plessis' victory over Whittaker.
Don't do yeah, my African brother. Yeah, my African brother. What's up?
I'm African, but I ain't no brother of yours, son.
This heated encounter would make the fight even more must-see than it already was. That is, until one circumstance changed the course of when this fight would take place. We were finally set to get this long-awaited grudge match at UFC 293 on September 9th of 2023. However, Dricus needed more time to recover from a foot injury and would not be ready for the targeted date. This would stir up even more tensions between the two camps as Israel Adesanya's head coach, Eugene Behrman, claimed that Du Plessis was no longer next in line for a title shot following the apparent injury.
It is what it is. He didn't want to push through his injury, so it doesn't matter to me. That's something to do with him and his team, and he has to go back and fight someone else.
Israel Adesanya, being the active champion that he's been, decided to take on Sean Strickland in the interim. So I guess we'll just see Adesanya Du Plessis fight next, right? Not so much. Due to the unpredictable nature of MMA, we saw Sean Strickland defeat Israel Adesanya in perhaps the biggest upset in UFC middleweight history, thus sending the originally slated main event into a tailspin. To make matters worse, Adesanya would tease a long break from the sport after losing the title. A fight that felt so close was now feeling less and less likely to happen. Luckily for us MMA fans, the landscape of this sport can change on a dime, and sometimes it just takes one fight to bring things back to order. And that fight took place at UFC 297 on January 20th of 2024. Sean Strickland would defend his belt for the first time against none other than Dricus Du Plessis. Fortunately for Adesanya, we saw his fellow African rival defeat Strickland in a razor-thin split decision, thus making Dricus the new king of the middleweight division. With Adesanya's brief hiatus from the sport finally coming to an end, it was now time to see these two settle the score. At UFC 305 on August 17th, these rivals will finally settle their differences once and for all, and it all goes down in Perth, Australia. In the lead up to this matchup, we saw a press conference take place on July 2nd where they met face-to-face once again. Israel Adesanya made it clear that he is not there to win another belt, but more so to eliminate Du Plessis for his comments. While Dricus says that he is going out there to kill Adesanya and hopes Israel aims to do the same for his sake. The two would continue the debate regarding Du Plessis' real African fighter comments, and the press conference would ultimately end in one of the longest stare-downs we've ever seen. I'm sure it's clear by now, but these guys don't like each other one bit, and that hatred has culminated into one of the most heated MMA beefs ever. Who walks away the UFC middleweight champion at UFC 305? Let us know what you all think in the comments below, and if you haven't already, make sure to hit that like button and that subscribe button for more MMA content.